Hey folks, today we're going to be covering the latest Tinto Talks for Project Caesar, aka EU5, and this one is totally wild, and I was not expecting some of the information we're going to see in this dev diary. This is all around, like, when is a country not a country, and what is playable in EU5. So we're just going to get straight into it. As I said, some very interesting stuff in here. So previously in grand strategy games, playable entities, or countries as most of us will call them, required you to own land, and their existence was based upon you owning land. If you think of Crusader Kings 3, EU4, Hoi 4, any of the Paradox games, you have to own land to actually play the game. Well, at least for the most part, as he says here, that is actually changing in Crusader Kings 3. We are getting landless gameplay in the next update, which is awesome, and the dev diaries around that have been very interesting. But let's get back to EU5, and as all that kind of preamble leads up, you are going to be able to play as non-landed countries in EU5, and they're going to go through here all the different types. And the first one we're going to see here is country type, and these are the different kinds of countries. You can play as a settled country, an army-based country, an extraterritorial country, and a society of pops. And Johan's going to go through and explain all those 4 different ones in this dev diary. So the first one is super easy. There's only 2 lines for this one. A settled country, that is how countries have always been played in EU4. This is where you have land, you build buildings, you have cores, you raise armies, you have a full ruler. It's that kind of country that we've all played in previous Europa Universalis games, so there's not much to really go over there. The next one is army-based countries. This type of country is very similar to the location-based ones, with a few differences. While they can do everything a location-based country does, they have one strong advantage and one strong disadvantage in comparison. The advantage is the fact that as long as they have an army, then this country will still exist, which we use to simulate Redacted, amongst other things. I'm wondering if Redacted is like the American Civil War. I wonder if you can get to a point where, like, you don't own enough land, but your army's still there, so you can win it back, something like that. There's probably an example I'm missing here, and somebody can let me know in the comments down below. But when I read this the first time, my initial thought was, oh, this will be like how they do civil wars, and you have armies that don't own land. There's other ones as well, like the Chinese War and things like that. There's going to be all these different examples, I'm sure, of like armies that were kind of successful and then like refounded a country afterwards. So that is what the army-based ones is. They don't technically have to own land, but as soon as the army is defeated, that is when the country no longer exists. As he says here, the disadvantage, depending on your point of view, is that if the country does not have an army at all, it will shatter into multiple pieces. So again, this is where if you don't have the army, your country, it looks like, just falls apart. You haven't got that army kind of reinforcing the structure of it by the looks of it. Many of the step hordes at the start of the game are ABCs, and that's what they're calling army-based countries, the acronym for them. So there you go. That is an example there as well that they've called out. The step hordes are going to work this way, and I'm sure the system's going to be used in other scenarios. Like I say, the Civil War one kind of fits to it from my point of view, but we'll see obviously later on. The next one is extraterritorial countries. These are countries that are based around the buildings they own. They can't own land directly, but can have subjects that do own land. Their buildings often have pops directly linked to the building, and those pops are also tied to the country. I wonder if this is like the Hudson Bay Company and things like that, which was really more about, it wasn't really a country, it was the forts in the future Canada that were kind of strung together, and it was like a trade company, but they didn't really technically own the land, although they did, they had a treaty. Those kind of things. I wonder if it also fits into these. One risk of this is that you need to keep a positive relationship with the places you are building in, or they may not be able to survive. I think they have some other examples of this. Yeah, various banks, holy orders, and the Hanseatic League holdings in 1337. These are probably more realistic ones, not the Hudson Bay Company. I've just read a book about that recently, so as you've probably noticed, I try squeezing it into many of these videos now, even when it doesn't really make sense. But in this example, he's saying these ones, the holy orders, the Hanseatic League. This is where they don't own the land directly, but they have holdings there, and that's how they go around their business, and you are going to be able to play as those, which is awesome. And he does call out a little bit more about a few of these. So banking countries, there are a few of these countries in Europe at the start of the game with Perusia and Bardi, and later on you get the Fugas and more. They have main offices in certain cities, and they have the possibility to build more branches around the world, which is awesome. Other countries can request loans from them, and they have the diplomatic ability to take over any estate loan that a country has and force that country to pay interest to them instead. They also have far lower interest rates on their estate loan, so it can easily become rich from other countries' debt. This is going to be a cool gameplay to do, where you go around as these banks, kind of hoover up debt from people, make them pay more in the long term, and then just build up this money and influence around the map, but you don't technically own anything on the map, like any locations. Although I wonder if later on you can kind of convert it into a full nation if you get enough land together or something like that. This is really cool. I can't wait to actually play these. These sound really interesting. And you can see here one of the advances that's coming. That is banking traditions, income from minting plus 10%, total loan capacity plus 50%, and this also unlocks the takeover loan ability. So this is how you could do it as a banking country, which is cool. The other one is trade companies. During the Age of Reformation, you can set up a trade company in overseas places, which will be a good subject to get trade going to benefit their overlord. They're going to go into more information about this in later Tinto Talks. There we go. That's the Hudson Bay Company. Actually relevant content there for us. The last one, which they already did mention as well, is the Hanseatic League. This is represented by a building-based country, which will have a few subjects that are normal land-owning countries. This is a playable country from the start, and one that will be really fun if you want to focus on purely trading in the game. This is going to be an awesome one. I'm sure, again, many of you are going to play this. I think a lot of people have been looking forward to this kind of like full dedicated gameplay like this, and that is what you're going to get in the Hanseatic League. And there's going to be other ways to do this as well, but that's going to be the primary start one that many of you are going to choose. And then lastly, they do actually call out here Holy Orders as a building-based type of country, and they're not going to go into much detail about this now, but they do also call out that Japan at the beginning of the game is also using the building-based country mechanic. That is awesome. That's going to be some really cool gameplay in Japan as well. These changes are absolutely crazy. This would have been awesome if we got one of these versions, but we're getting it for all these additional ways to play the game. And already what we've seen here is just fantastic. I can't wait to get my hands on this. And then the last type of country, which they called out before, is the Society of Population. This one is really cool as well. This is one of the most challenging types of countries in the game, as most of the mechanics are not available to them. They own no land and instead are entirely based upon the populations associated with them. As they own no land, they do not interact with RGOs, nor can they build buildings. Almost all of them start without advances in taxation, codifying laws, or constructing cities. A lot of the world has different types of society of population, where larger groups of people live, but they are on the fringe of the most organized and advanced states. In the New World, there is a mixture of settled countries and society of pops. I would imagine like the Aztecs, the Incas, maybe like the Cherokee, and a few of the other ones, they're probably going to be settled. I know the Cherokee weren't really settled, but they're probably like the most kind of settled in North America. There's some other examples as well. Whereas the Society of Pops, I wonder if that's going to be more of the migratory ones. And I think they've already called out in like northern Scandinavia, that is where it's going to be especially as well. That was the hint last week as to what was coming this week, and I imagine that's what's really getting called out here as well. These type of countries can migrate their pops from one province to another over time. They can also force the allegiance of pops to change to them through warfare with another society. The borders between different societies and even settled countries are extremely fluid, and they can be in the same location as either of them. So they can actually travel through settled countries to get somewhere else. This is going to be wild gameplay. They had something that was a little like this in Imperator Rome, but you couldn't travel through other nations. You could only travel through uncolonized areas on the map. It was really cool to play, but this is like another step up from that, it sounds like. They can raise levies directly from their population, and their armies can live off the land anywhere, gathering some small amount of food from where they go. Their armies can always force any population on their culture and religion to swear allegiance to their society, so you can kind of unify them all together. Amongst the ways they can stop being colonized is by forcing colonizers to the peace table, forcing them to cancel their colonial charters. That was called out last week. Somebody asked, like, how do I stop people colonizing as a Native American or someone like that? And he did say there, if you're at war with somebody, they can't colonize the area you're at war for. And as he says here, once you get into peace with them, you can ask them to not settle in your locations by the sounds of it. A settled country in a war can force a society of population to abandon populations that they own, and they will no longer own any population. That society will no longer be an existing country. So that's how you can defeat these. You can basically beat them in a war, and then they dissolve away. I wonder if the population kind of moves into your land and they still exist. It does say abandon the population they own, but the population must like go somewhere. It must go into your lands or something. I can't imagine it just fully disappears. I mean, that never happened in any of these wars. Let's not think about it too much. Or I wonder whether it is like, oh, they just died off because they didn't have any lands of their own or something like that. We'll see further in the future. A society of pops can attempt to settle if they achieve certain advances, after which they will take control over all the locations they have pops and are the dominant culture and religion, and then they become a settled country. So if you do want to settle down, it sounds like you don't have to, but if you do want to, you can do that through the mechanics of the game. Currently, though, the gameplay experience is not where they want it. Unless it is improved by the beta, they are very likely to be AI only at release. So after all of that and being excited about playing these, it looks like there's a chance, at least at launch, we might not be able to play these ourselves. I wonder if there's just not enough stuff to keep you interested. As you can't do any of the normal state crafting stuff, I wonder if it's just kind of boring to play. I'm not too sure. I guess that's what he's talking about. It just isn't that exciting to actually do. I wonder if they won't release it at launch, and maybe they will have like the first expansion will be focused around these countries. Give them a lot of content, give them some of the mechanics to play, and then move on with them. I'm not too mad about that. It is cool they're attempting this, and if they need a little bit more time to make it actually fun to play, I'm okay with them delaying it, concentrating on everything else, and then coming back to this in the future when they have time, because I do want them to do this properly, and for what we've already read, it could be really interesting to play. You're probably not going to want to play this all the time, but a cool little campaign or something doing it is going to be really interesting to do. So yeah, give them the time, and hopefully we get some cool stuff in the future. And then finally, they do want to clarify Society of People and army-based countries have ways to become settled through mechanics. There are no other normal ways of changing country types except through special events. So yeah, you can't like de-settle like England or something and make them a society of people and just go rampaging around the map as like a horde of English people. You know, that would be pretty crazy. But he does call out through special events, so I'm sure there's going to be some historical events that happen that change them from one kind to another. I'm sure that is what he's talking about. And with that, guys, that is the end of the Dev Diary for this week. A pretty short one, but as we've seen, a very interesting one. And even if we only get 3 of these out of the 4, that is crazy. Obviously, in previous games, you have been able to play as a Merchant Republic or something like that, and it wasn't like anything too crazy. Whereas this way, it looks like they are like rebuilding how you actually play as a country in some of these respects. So, yeah, I'm very excited for this. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. He does say here, next week, they're going to talk about buildings you can build outside of your own country. That's going to be another interesting one. Let me know what you think you might be talking about. I wonder if it's like ports places, especially when you're colonizing, to kind of help you move around the map a little bit easier with your ships, but without having to directly own a location. Or maybe like little forts and things like that you can place down. But anyway, we'll find out much more about that next week. As I said, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, but I'll see you in the next video.